In the distant reaches of the galaxy, a race long forgotten by the stars had left behind a legacy so powerful it could shape the fate of entire civilizations. The celestial mantle was a creation of their genius, a suit of armor unlike anything the universe had ever seen, forged from materials unknown to all other species. Its technology was a marvel of unimaginable proportions. It was said that whoever wore it would hold the power to dominate the stars themselves. The armor was more than a mere suit of protection. It was a weapon, a tool of destruction that bent the very fabric of reality to its will. The mantle could manipulate gravity, twist energy, and deflect entire fleets with ease. No army, no weapon could stand against it for centuries. The galaxy trembled at its name. No conqueror dared challenge it. No empire thought itself worthy of facing its might. It was a symbol of ultimate power, a relic of an ancient time, when the galaxy was shaped by the hands of the few. The mantle had once belonged to a race known as the Siraxians, an ancient species that had reached the pinnacle of their technological prowess. Their civilization had flourished for millennia. Their cities stretched across entire planets. Their ships soared across the stars faster than light. Their knowledge was vast, their power infinite, and they had created the celestial mantle to ensure that no one would ever threaten their reign with it. They believed they could crush any enemy and reshape the universe in their image. But the Siraxians were not the only ones to seek such power, and as their civilization grew, so did their enemies. Over time, the mantle had passed from one conqueror to another, each one seeking to wield its power for their own purposes. The Talenthians, a fierce warrior race, had been the first to claim it. They had uncovered the mantle's resting place deep within the ruins of a long-forgotten world, and when they donned the armor, they felt the surge of power course through them. Their enemies fell before them. Their fleets shattered, their planets burned. The Talenthians believed they were destined to rule, and with the celestial mantle at their command, they nearly did. For centuries, the Talenthians wore the mantle and waged war against any species that dared to oppose them. They became the most feared race in the galaxy. No civilization was safe from their wrath. Their enemies whispered in fear of the celestial mantle, and the warriors who wore it, legends grew of its power, and the devastation it left in its wake. Fleets were lost in moments. Entire worlds were reduced to rubble. The galaxy trembled, and the Talenthians stood unchallenged at the top of the food chain. But the mantle's journey was not yet finished, for, as the Talenthians ruled the stars, they unknowingly set the stage for a new chapter, a chapter that would challenge everything they believed about their invincibility. For in the farthest corners of the galaxy, a race that had once been seen as insignificant was beginning to rise, and it would be the humans who would one day shatter the celestial mantle's legacy forever. The Talenthians were fierce and proud, their warriors, unmatched in skill and cunning, and with the celestial mantle adorning their generals, they had swept through the galaxy like a storm, conquering everything in their path. No race was too mighty, no fleet too great. The mantle gave them strength beyond measure. It was a symbol of their supremacy, a tool of absolute domination, and they were certain they would never face a challenge they could not overcome. When the Talenthian High Command first learned of the mantle's discovery, they knew it would change everything. They had already been a dominant force in the galaxy, but this ancient relic would elevate them to a position of power that no other species could contest. Their leaders ordered that the armor be taken and brought to their warlord, General Azareth, a battle-hardened veteran, known for his cruelty and unyielding drive for conquest. When he first put on the celestial mantle, he felt the world shift around him, as if the very air itself bowed to his will. The mantle was more than armor. It was an extension of Azareth's body. He could feel the energy of the universe flowing through him. The power surged from the core of the suit and into his very being. His senses expanded, and his strength multiplied. A mere thought could alter the very fabric of space around him. Gravity bent at his command. Time itself felt malleable in his hands. No longer bound by the limitations of the physical world, Azareth became a living god, and the galaxy trembled at the sound of his name. Under his leadership, the Talenthian Empire grew even stronger. Planets fell to their might. Systems were brought to heel in record time. the celestial mantle made their every victory certain. Azareth's warlords followed his lead. They wore the armor in battle, and no force stood against them. Entire fleets of ships disappeared without a trace before they even had the chance to fire a single shot. Soldiers from 1,000 different races were struck down with no warning, no mercy. Azareth's first conquest with the mantle was the peaceful planet of Orestes, a thriving world full of life and beauty. The Talenthians had long desired its resources, and Azareth decided to claim it for his empire. He led an armada to its doorstep, and without a single warning they unleashed a devastating barrage of energy blasts upon the planet's surface. Entire cities were reduced to ash in moments. The Orestian people were no match for the fury of the mantle. Their defenses crumbled with each passing second. The air grew thick with dust and smoke as the once beautiful world was turned into a charred ruin. When the dust finally settled, Orestes was nothing more than a barren wasteland, and the Talenthians stood victorious. Azareth surveyed the devastation, his eyes cold and unfeeling. He cared not for the destruction he had wrought, for he had achieved what no other race could dream of. He was the master of the universe, and the celestial mantle was his tool for ensuring that no one would ever rise against him again. But as Azareth stood over the ruins of Orestes, he felt a strange unease deep within him, a feeling he had never known before. Something stirred within him, a quiet voice whispering that even this power could one day falter, and that perhaps his enemies had not all been wiped away. As he thought, there were forces in the universe that moved in silence and darkness, and they would one day challenge the Talenthian Empire in ways that no one could predict. For centuries after the conquest of Orestes, the Talenthians continued their campaign of expansion. The galaxy became a quiet and subdued place. No race dared oppose them, as the celestial mantle continued to serve as a symbol of their unparalleled might. Planets fell to the Talenthian Empire, one after another. Civilizations crumbled without resistance. The mantle's power turned even the most fortified defenses to ash in moments. The galaxy watched as the Talenthians made the stars their domain. As the years passed, and the mantle moved from one Talenthian general to another, its legend grew. Each new wearer added their name to its story. Azareth's name was etched into the armor's history, but it was soon joined by many others. The armor became a tool for the Empire's most feared leaders to carry out their will with absolute authority. The Talenthians did not care for diplomacy or compromise. They were the rulers of the universe, and the mantle proved it time and time again. With each passing century, the Talenthian Empire only grew stronger as their conquest continued. The galaxy's once proud civilizations were reduced to subjugation, their cultures wiped out or forced to conform to Talenthian rule. The mantle left no room for resistance. It was a presence that spread fear in every corner of the universe. The stories of its power became legends, and those who had heard them began to wonder if anyone could ever challenge the Talenthians and their mighty armor. But there was one thing the Talenthians did not foresee: a small but determined race that had long been ignored by the galaxy's ruling powers. The humans, the once primitive species from a distant corner of the galaxy, had begun to rise from the ashes of their past wars. Their society was young, but resilient, driven by a constant thirst for knowledge and exploration. The humans had reached the stars, but they were not like the others. Their technology was different. They adapted quickly and learned from their mistakes. They became more than the sum of their parts, and their ambition knew no bounds. In the quiet spaces of the universe, as the Talenthian Empire expanded ever further, the humans continued to grow in strength and ingenuity. Their scientists made breakthroughs that no one had expected. Their fleets began to rival the older powers in speed and maneuverability, and their military strategies grew more sophisticated each year. As their reach extended across the stars, they encountered the ancient ruins left behind by past civilizations, and their curiosity led them to discover the stories of the celestial mantle and the empire that had wielded it for so long. At first, the Talenthians dismissed the humans as an insignificant race that would never pose a real threat. They were a species still in the early stages of their interstellar journey, and the idea that they could challenge the might of the Talenthian Empire seemed laughable to the Talenthians. Their armor was invincible, their power eternal, But the humans were beginning to understand something that the Talenthians had forgotten. The universe was full of surprises, and sometimes the greatest challenges came from the most unexpected places. The mantle's legacy was secure in the minds of those who wore it, but the seeds of change had already been planted in the hearts of the humans, and their ingenuity would soon bring them face to face with a force far greater than the Talenthians had ever anticipated. The universe had long written off humanity as a fleeting spark in the cold void of space, but they were wrong. What they didn't understand was that humans were not just survivors. They were adapters. They had seen the horrors of their past and learned from them. They knew that survival was not just about brute strength or overwhelming power. It was about resourcefulness and relentless determination. It was about finding a way when there seemed to be no way at all. Over the centuries, humanity had advanced quickly. While once they were trapped on their homeworld Earth, their curious minds had now pushed them far beyond their origins. They had mastered space travel and formed alliances with other species, creating an impressive network of interstellar trade and diplomacy. Their fleets were fast, their technology was diverse, and their commanders were brilliant. With each passing year, humanity became more and more influential across the galaxy. Even the Talenthians began to take notice. The first time the humans came into direct contact with the Talenthians was a moment of tension. An accidental encounter near the outer edge of the Talenthian-controlled sector. A group of human explorers had stumbled into Talenthian space. Their sensors had malfunctioned, and they found themselves unknowingly straying too close to one of the Talenthian outposts. Their ship was a standard exploration vessel, nothing extraordinary about it, but to the Talenthians, it was an intrusion and a challenge to their dominance. The Talenthians immediately dispatched a fleet to intercept the humans and make an example of them. The fleet was vast and powerful, but the humans weren't naive. They understood the danger they were in, and they weren't about to roll over like the many others who had faced the Talenthians before. Instead of cowering, the humans made a bold decision. They would not back down from this encounter. They would fight. They would not allow their curiosity and their exploration to be snuffed out by some distant empire. They had a secret weapon, a new type of weapon that had not been tested in battle before, but the humans had faith in it. The human ship's captain, General Lyra Talvoth, knew the stakes and made the call to engage. The human ship opened fire on the Talenthian fleet, but it wasn't like anything the Talenthians had encountered before. Instead of unleashing a brute force attack, the humans used precision strikes, aimed at the power cores of the Talenthian ships. It was a tactic the Talenthians had never seen before. They had expected a straightforward battle, a clash of fleets, but the humans were unpredictable. Their strikes were sharp and deliberate, targeting weak points and disabling the Talenthian vessels one by one. The Talenthians were stunned. They had never been caught off guard like this. Before, they were used to crushing their enemies without effort, but these humans had a different kind of intelligence. They fought with strategy and innovation, not blind aggression, and the Talenthians realized too late that the humans were not to be underestimated. When the battle ended, the Talenthians were forced to retreat. Their fleet had been heavily damaged, and the humans had shown them something they had not seen in centuries, a species that wasn't just looking to survive, but to carve out their own place in the galaxy, a species that was smart enough to fight back, even against the might of the Celestial Mantle's empire. The Talenthians had never believed anyone could challenge them, but now they had to consider the possibility that humanity might be different, and they would soon learn just how different humanity truly was. After the unexpected skirmish at the edge of Talenthian space, humanity's reputation spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Their victory was a shock to the established powers. It wasn't just that they had fought back. It was the way they had fought back, their precision, their strategy, their ability to strike at weaknesses instead of going for brute force, left the Talenthians reeling. For the first time in centuries, a race thought to be nothing more than a nuisance had made them reconsider their invincibility. General Lyra Talvoth had returned to Earth after the battle with her fleet battered but proud. She had proven that humanity could stand against the might of the Talenthian Empire and survive. But she knew the real fight was just beginning. The humans had drawn the attention of the galaxy's most powerful empire, and their victory might be seen as a fluke, But Lyra wasn't one to rest on her laurels. She understood that the Talenthians would be back, and when they came, they wouldn't make the same mistake twice. Lyra and her council of commanders quickly realized that humanity's chances of winning a full-scale war against the Talenthians were slim. They didn't have the strength or resources to match the Talenthians in terms of sheer firepower and military might. They needed an edge, something that could tip the balance in their favor, and that's when they found it. The humans had spent years researching ancient alien relics, hoping to uncover lost technologies that could help them in their struggles against the galaxy's more established powers. Among these relics was the story of the celestial mantle, the armor that had conquered the galaxy for centuries. Lyra had studied the ancient texts carefully and was aware of its power, but more importantly, she was aware of its flaw. Its over-reliance on the energy conduits that powered it. If those conduits could be disrupted or disabled, the mantle would lose its strength. It would no longer be the invincible weapon that had crushed so many before. It was a risky plan, almost foolhardy. But Lyra believed in it. She knew that if they could figure out a way to disable the mantle's energy core, they might have a chance to finally put an end to Talenthian dominance. She gathered her best engineers and strategists to work on the plan. The task was daunting but not impossible. The celestial mantle's energy flow was a complex system with multiple fail-safes built in by its creators. But humans were resourceful and inventive, and they had the advantage of thinking outside the box, something the Talenthians had never needed to consider. The humans began to modify their weapons and technology to target the energy core of the mantle with precision strikes. They couldn't afford a full assault on the armor. It was too powerful, but they could make it vulnerable with careful planning. They would need to get close enough to the armor's wearer to strike without being detected or obliterated before they could complete their mission. It would take time, but time was something humanity had in abundance. They would use it wisely. Lyra and her team worked tirelessly in secret, preparing for the inevitable confrontation with the Talenthians. They knew that when the time came, it would be all or nothing. If they succeeded, they would cripple the Talenthian Empire for good. If they failed, it could mean the end of humanity. But Lyra didn't see failure as an option. She knew that the galaxy was changing and humanity had a role to play in its future, one that would no longer be defined by fear, but by strength and determination. The humans had already proved that they could stand against the Talenthians. Now it was time to prove that they could defeat them. The time for preparation had passed, and the moment of reckoning had arrived. General Lyra Talvoth stood before her fleet, her heart steady, but her mind focused with the weight of the mission ahead pressing heavily upon her. They had spent months getting ready for this day. Every weapon, every piece of technology had been tailored for the one objective: to take down the invincible celestial mantle. The plan was risky and would take precision, but if they succeeded, it would change everything. Lyra's fleet was small compared to the vast Talenthian armada that would soon be arriving at their designated target, but she knew the odds were stacked against them. Every detail had been accounted for down to the smallest calculation. They had studied every inch of the Talenthian ships and weapons systems. Their mission was clear. They would not defeat the Talenthian fleet directly. Instead, they would disable the mantle's power core and take down the leader wearing it. If they could find a way to do that without being destroyed first. The Talenthians were coming, a full battle fleet sent to punish the humans for their defiance. But what they didn't know was that this time the humans were ready. This time, humanity had a trick the Talenthians hadn't expected. When the battle began, Lyra's fleet didn't engage directly. They didn't open fire as soon as the Talenthian ships arrived. Instead, they used their new weaponry: precision strike missiles designed to disable key power systems in the Talenthian ships. The Talenthians had been expecting a direct assault, but what they found instead were the swift missiles that hit like lightning, causing explosions in strategic areas, disabling weapon systems, and causing confusion. The Talenthian fleet was momentarily thrown into disarray. Their ships struggled to maintain their formation under the unexpected assault as their energy reserves were drained by the targeted strikes. In the midst of the chaos, Lyra's fleet slipped through the cracks. Their stealth ships, designed to appear as nothing more than fleeting shadows in the vastness of space, took advantage of the disarray. They moved like ghosts through the battle zone toward the heart of the Talenthian fleet. Their objective was singular: find the Talenthian general, the wearer of the mantle, and disable its core. Lyra knew that getting close enough to the general's ship was the most dangerous part of the mission. The mantle's power wasn't just destructive. It was vast and uncontrollable. The moment they got close, the Talenthians would notice and unleash every weapon at their disposal against them. But the humans had a secret weapon, a specialized EMP pulse, that would momentarily disrupt the mantle's energy field just long enough for them to get in close enough to strike. As the fleet drew nearer to the Talenthian flagship, the ship carrying General Caleth, the Talenthian leader who wore the celestial mantle, Lyra's pulse shot out across the blackness of space. It struck like a spear cutting through the silence, and for a brief moment, the mantle's energy field flickered weakly. Caleth's ship was temporarily vulnerable, a window of opportunity that would last mere seconds. Lyra didn't hesitate. She ordered the strike, and her ships launched a concentrated barrage of energy weapons aimed at the energy core of Caleth's flagship. The beams cut through the weakened defenses of the Talenthian flagship with precision unlike anything the Talenthians had encountered before. Inside the mantle, Caleth roared in fury as his ship's power began to destabilize. The energy conduits were failing. The mantle flickered and spasmed, but Caleth was not ready to admit defeat. His hand slammed against the controls, but the damage was irreversible. The mantle was crumbling under the relentless strike of the humans. For the first time in centuries, the Talenthians felt fear as they realized the impossible had happened. The mantle, their symbol of invincibility, was no longer invincible. As the Talenthian flagship lurched under the barrage of strikes, General Caleth felt the mantle's power fading. The once mighty armor that had crushed countless civilizations trembled beneath his hands. The energy conduits had been hit. The very core that powered the celestial mantle was destabilizing, and Caleth could do nothing to stop it. Every command he gave seemed to make matters worse. The hum of the mantle's core was dying down, and its once unshakable force was weakening. Outside the flagship, Lyra Talvoth watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The moment they had been working toward had arrived. The mantle, the source of Talenthian dominance, was breaking apart. They had struck the heart of it, but they had no idea just how powerful the reaction would be. Even now, as Caleth's ship began to crackle and burn under the weight of its own failing power, Lyra knew they could not afford to celebrate. Not yet. The Talenthian fleet, thrown into disarray, scrambled to regain control, but their once unstoppable armada was crumbling. The ships were no longer coordinated. The once pristine ranks had turned to chaos and confusion. Their leaders, the generals wearing the mantle, were no longer able to direct their forces with the same precision and ruthless efficiency the mantle had provided them. Lyra knew they had to act fast. This was their chance to cripple the Talenthian Empire once and for all. She ordered the fleet to press on their advantage, to strike at every weakness of the Talenthians' remaining forces. The remaining Talenthian ships scattered in fear. They had never experienced this before. Their enemies weren't retreating or pleading for mercy. They were advancing. They were taking the fight to them, and the mantle's collapse had turned the tables entirely. Caleth's flagship, now a damaged wreck, began to drift aimlessly through space, but even in its weakened state, it remained a symbol of the Talenthian Empire's power, and they would not relinquish it so easily. General Caleth knew the moment was slipping from his grasp, but his desperation burned bright. He would not let his empire fall. He could not allow this humiliating defeat to be the end of his legacy. Despite the failure of the mantle's power core, Caleth fought with a fervor that defied logic. He ordered his remaining forces to focus all fire on the human fleet, using what little strength remained in his flagship to launch a counterattack. But the humans were already one step ahead. Their weapons and tactics had evolved in response to the Talenthian threat. They were no longer the desperate underdogs they had been. They were a force to be reckoned with. The battle raged on, but the advantage now firmly rested in the hands of the humans, as their ships outmaneuvered and outlasted the Talenthians. Caleth's ship, now little more than a floating tomb of its former glory, was surrounded on all sides by the remaining human vessels. Inside, the Talenthian leader felt the weight of his failure settle in. He had once been unstoppable. The celestial mantle had made him the most feared being in the galaxy. Now, as his ship creaked under the strain, Caleth realized the truth. He had been deceived by his own arrogance. The mantle, the weapon he had thought would never fail, had failed him, and in doing so, it had doomed his empire. Lyra Talvoth's fleet surrounded Kalath's flagship in a moment of pure resolve. The battle was all but won, and humanity had claimed a victory that would echo throughout the galaxy for years to come. The Talanthians had learned a hard lesson. The mantle was no longer their weapon of dominance, and the galaxy had changed forever. The Talanthian Empire, once an unstoppable force, was in ruins. General Kalath's flagship, a symbol of their invincibility, was now a lifeless wreck drifting aimlessly through the cold void of space. The celestial mantle, the ancient armor that had granted them their dominance, lay shattered, its power no longer an indomitable force. The mantle had not just failed Kalath, it had failed the entire Talanthian Empire. Humanity had achieved what no one believed possible. Against all odds, they had struck at the heart of the Talanthian power and torn it down. But Lyra Talvoth knew that this victory, though monumental, was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and the balance of power had shifted, but that didn't mean it would remain in their favor forever. The humans had proven they could defeat the Talanthians, but maintaining their newfound place among the stars would require even greater strength, unity, and wisdom. As Lyra's fleet surveyed the wreckage of the Talanthian forces, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She had led her people into the heart of danger, and now they stood on the precipice of a new era. The Talanthians were no longer the unquestioned rulers of the galaxy, but the vacuum they left behind could lead to new conflicts. Power struggles would erupt among the remaining factions, and new enemies would rise to take their place. But this time, humanity would not stand idly by. Lyra addressed her fleet, her voice steady and resolute. "This is our moment," she said. "We have proven our strength, but this victory is not the end. It is only the beginning. The galaxy is ours to shape now. We will lead with honor, wisdom, and justice, not the tyranny of the mantle. Our mission is clear, to build a future where no empire will dominate, and no species will be enslaved again." The message rippled through humanity's forces, filling them with hope and determination. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had a new beacon of hope, one not built on fear, but on unity and progress. Humanity had shown that power could be wielded with responsibility, and that the greatest strength was not in overwhelming might, but in the courage to stand up against oppression and to build something better. In the days that followed, the humans took control of the remnants of the Talanthian fleet, not to use it for conquest, but to ensure stability. They offered protection to the planets and civilizations that had been under Talanthian rule, establishing peace treaties and alliances where there had once been war. The humans became the new leaders, not by force, but by the example they set, by the legacy of their victory over the mantle. But even as humanity rebuilt, there were whispers in the shadows of the galaxy, rumors of other ancient powers, hidden forces, and long-forgotten weapons that still lay dormant, waiting to rise again. The Talanthians had fallen, but the galaxy was still full of unknown threats, and the human journey was far from over. Lyra Talvoth stood on the bridge of her flagship, gazing out at the stars. She had won this battle, but the true test lay ahead. The universe was vast, and it was still full of mysteries to be uncovered. Humanity had only just begun to explore its place in the grand tapestry of the cosmos. With a deep breath, she turned away from the stars, her heart full of resolve. The mantle had fallen, but a new era had begun, one where humanity would shape its own destiny. And this time, the galaxy would be their own to protect, not to conquer.